Now let's move on with the rest of this bulletin. China has slammed the creation of a space force by the United States, describing it as a direct threat to peace and security of outer space.
Outer space domain strategy in disregard of opposition from the international community in recent years, the U.S. actions have seriously violated the international consensus of peacefully exploiting outer space, undermined global strategic balance and stability, constituted direct threat to peace and security of the outer space, which China is deeply concerned about and strongly opposes.
Geng says that China has always opposed attempts to militarize outer space. It says that a new branch of the U.S. military could set off an arms race there. The spokesman urged the international community to make joint efforts to prevent outer space from turning into a new battlefield. On Friday, U.S. President Donald Trump signed an act ordering the establishment of the Space Force. Trump said that American superiority in space was absolutely vital. From Ontario, I'm now joined by Jason Unruhe, political commentator and analyst. Good to have you with us, Jason. So China is saying outer space could turn into a battlefield, and this should be prevented. President Trump insisting that the U.S. superiority in space is absolutely vital. What's going on?
Well, essentially, space is a lot like the world as it was maybe 100 years ago, where there was, or maybe 200 years ago, essentially the beginnings of the colonial era, where when empires began to expand, the first thing they did was find new territory and establish some military outposts in order to dictate their supremacy over the area. Space is not much different in this regard. One of the things that is most important about this is that space travel is essentially a coming aspect of the future. Just as the way the British Empire used to control the seas, the United States is now trying to control the area in orbit around the Earth. I mean, this is the same kind of territorial expansion. This takes a slightly different form than it did with the previous colonial powers. Now, this also has a very definite military aspect to it. The coming idea of placing weapons in space, much of what was previously science fiction of missile platforms and cannons being placed in orbit around the Earth is a real thing that could be coming very, very soon, as many of the world's larger powers are competing for territory actually in space, and it becomes a race. It becomes another arm race, essentially. Which one is going to maintain that dominance? Now, many of the countries around the world seem to feel that this is inappropriate, that space should remain an area free of much politics and certainly free of any weapons or militarization, etc. They feel that space exploration is a scientific endeavor, which I would tend to agree with, and feel that it should be remain open to anyone and everyone who's capable of travel. But this is not the way empires act. Empires act in a manner which reinforces their power, and that includes maintaining control over what is the orbit around the Earth. So I believe that that's what the real goal here by the United States is, to maintain some kind of military supremacy and try to control any possible activity in orbit in the future.
And Jason, the question is, what is it that is making the Chinese sound so concerned about all of this? They want to prevent it.
Well, essentially, this is the U.S. is going to essentially perhaps establish some kind of weapons in space that could be used against China, and this would certainly be something that would undermine the stability and the security of the Chinese people, the Chinese government, etc. All this also could tend into a war where competing countries could end up shooting down each other's satellites, be they for peaceful use or military use, etc. I think everybody has the right to be concerned about this situation, because we know what the United States has done in the past. We know what the old colonial powers have always done in the past with these kinds of areas, and that is militarize them for their own benefit, undermining the benefit of other people. And I think that's really what China is concerned here, that the United States may gain a hegemonic control over the space around the planet and would use that to undermine and destroy countries and people that it feels are its enemies.
Okay, appreciate your comments. Jason Unruhe, political commentator, analyst, joined me from Ontario.